are alive and well in many ways, and that's not going away.
This is the North American Service broadcasting on 17.70, 15.42, 12.05.
How you will worship him together.
What have you done to its eyes?
The next time you're frightened in the dark, don't scream.
They are not what they claim to be. You're listening to Radio
I just want to play it for you.
For 2 seconds. Ew.
You're not the pizza man.
Are you sure? I have a all-meat pizza with sausage, ham, Canadian bacon, regular bacon, salami, prosciutto, gabagool, and also pepperoni.
Ow.
Can we all come in?
What?
I need to use your phone so I can figure out where to take this fucking pizza.
Oh my god.
Also, that music is that is way too much for porno music. That was insane. This is better.
This is just good. It's called Spider Pussy.
No way. Where are you finding these?
I don't know. It's a playlist called Classic Porno Music.
On what? If it's on
YouTube.
On YouTube. Okay. Turn it off. We're gonna get copyright striked. It's okay though. Don't be mad.
I'm mad. I turned it off.
Don't be sad.
I'm sad.
Well, that was our intro, and that was our whole episode.
Oh.
Now we have to go answer the door because there's a pizza guy there who wants to fuck us.
There's like 15 pizza guys.
There's like 15 dudes outside to deliver a pizza, which is really just all of their wieners, because that's how that works, I guess, in real life.
I think we should have to start over because we can't play any of that.
No, we really can't.
Do you want me to should we just keep going on this one?
Oh, Dom, I love you. Will you be my Valentine?
Okay.
I wonder what we're gonna do this year for Valentine's Day.
Anal. Fingers crossed.
Wow.
Maybe not. What are we doing?
I don't know. I mean, you just really, that was a total curveball. I wasn't expecting you to say that, so.
Are we not doing that at all this year?
Anal?
Yeah.
I don't know. Oh, welcome to Radio Grave. I'm here with analyst.
Serial analyst.
Serial analyst Dom.
Data analytics.
Dana.
My name is Dana. Dana Analytics.
I think your name is Danel.
Danel.
They're like, is Daniel here? You're like, it's Danel. I'm here with Danel Makasuya.
And I'm here with Anal Byland.
How dare you? You're fucked up. Well, welcome. Welcome to Radio Grave, you guys. It's our Valentine's Day special. Bow, bow, bow. We're gonna make love. We're gonna do anal. We're gonna love each other.
Anal.
It's gonna be consensual. And it's gonna involve extraterrestrials.
That's true.
You guys, we have a really fucking good episode for you today. It's our Valentine's Day special.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so special. It's about love. It's about trust. It's about lust, space, the woman of your dreams.
Interspecies breeding.
Yeah, that's kind of the surprise of the episodes.
It's an amazing story. It is a lifetime of love between a man and an alien woman.
It's beautiful. We're talking about Crescent, a love story. I wanted to do this episode for season 1. I was just thinking about this topic for over a year.
You've been thinking about this topic for way longer than that. But I mean, as an episode, you've been thinking about it for...
Yeah, as an episode.
Because we've known about this story for...
Oh, forever.
Ages, yeah.
Forever, ever. A lot of people on the Instagram were super into the alien, UFO, the ufology episodes.
Yeah, I find it a very pleasant surprise that people are so interested in alien shit compared to true crime. Because I feel like everyone's somewhat into true crime. Like, it's so mainstream. It's so popular that, like, you would assume people would just end up here for that. But the fact that people are really into the alien shit, I'm like, we got that. So
this is the story of a man named David Huggins. David is described to be, quote, the nicest man you will ever meet. As of 2025, he is an 81-year-old resident of Hoboken, New Jersey.
New Jersey.
We're recording this earlier than 2025, but hopefully he doesn't die before this comes out. I don't think he's going to die. He's a pretty healthy gentleman.
Yeah.
But yeah, he is an 81-year-old resident of Hoboken, New Jersey. He works part-time at a local deli called Lisa's. At work, he knows all of the regulars, and they know him. He's just a really popular guy, and his neighbors love him. They think of him as the sweet and mellow grandpa of the block. To everyone around him, he appears to have the ordinary life of an old man. However, David is far from being an ordinary old man, and the story of his life so far is one of the most fascinating I've ever read about in my life. Truly. David Huggins is a lifelong experiencer of extraterrestrial phenomena, including abduction and very close encounters. Very close encounters.
Very close.
Very, encounters of, the 10th kind.
Encounters of the 69th kind, probably.
Literally. I think it is actually encounters of the 7th kind, but I don't remember the scale. Anyway, don't quote me on that. I can edit it in. But yeah, very close encounters with beings from what can assume to be not necessarily from space, but actually in a different dimension. For several decades, David has used art therapy to cope with his lifelong experiences as an abductee. And he has slowly documented his recovered memories from his life, including many from childhood, all the way from 8 years old. And he has accumulated a collection of over 100 pieces and continues to paint to this day. His work is super intense, vulnerable, and emotional.
On the Instagram, we're going to post at least a few of his paintings. They're very striking. I mean, if you take them as depictions of actual events, of nonfiction events from this guy, it's pretty wild.
He didn't really show people his paintings until way later. He appeared in the Hidden Hand documentary on Netflix. It was back when Netflix had all those fucking super crappy, shitty documentaries.
Had?
I mean, it still has them. It was a lot less money. They were really accepting anything. Mm-hmm. I think it was 10, 11 years ago. And that was the first time I ever saw anything, any of his art or his story, pieces of his story. He had a neighbor, and this neighbor published a book way later on. It's called Love in an Alien Purgatory, which features a lot of his art and details about his story that you can't really find anywhere else because she spent a lot of personal time with him.
I think Love in an Alien Purgatory would be such a sick concept album.
Yeah.
Someone should make a Scrams album.
Love in an Alien Purgatory. The thing about it is that he said in a Q&A that he hated the name.
No, that's fair. I think it has a really negative connotation. The word choice, especially purgatory.
Yeah. After, or around the same time, Love in an Alien Purgatory came out, he ended up being contacted by a Canadian independent filmmaker named Brad Abrams. And he spent, I think, 3 years with David working on basically a documentary of David and his life.
Really? It was that long?
Yeah. And he ended up premiering this documentary in 2017. It's called Love and Saucers.
Very good documentary.
Such a good documentary. Amazing documentary. And you get to see like David's life and everything. So Brad Abrahams, though, he's not a biased or a controversial like figure, but he does question the conspiracies and he calls out the fakers and he's totally level-headed. And he would say about David, in a sea of outlandish claims, there was one that rose to the surface, and that was David's story. This is like the ultimate alien encounters abduction episode ever. I don't know if we'll do one better than this.
It's hard to beat.
I know we kind of talked about him already, but can you tell me about who David is?
So, like you said before, David is an artist. He's a painter. He studied at the Art Students League in New York City in his 20s. He appreciates Impressionism and Expressionism the most. He's drawn to the fluid, loose, colorful styles.
Styles.
Because I was going to say starls. He's drawn to the fluid, loose, colorful styles, and this reflects in his own work. He's also a writer, but only by hobby. He's more of an art guy. But he has been working on a script for several years, and he writes everything by hand. No clickety-clack.
No clickety-clack. He's an old school guy.
Although not a spiritual man, he is a very thoughtful man. He likes to meditate to calm his nerves, plus the peacefulness inspires him to paint. David also does what he calls throwing the Yi Jing. The Yi Jing is an ancient Chinese text used for divination. Modern Yi Jing divination practices consist of shaking and dropping coins. And David uses the I Ching as a tool for guidance, personal reflection, and to interpret his dreams.
I thought about maybe trying it because it looks cool.
I wanted to when I saw it in the documentary. I was like, that's pretty sick.
Yeah.
Better than flipping a coin.
Yeah.
He is also an avid collector of VHS tapes and a connoisseur of the horror and the sci-fi.
He's a horror sci-fi gentleman.
Yeah. He claims to have a collection of a couple thousand, quote unquote, VHS tapes. His favorite thing about VHS is the ritual of rewinding, fast forward, pause, etc. He appreciates the sounds of the tape rolling in a VCR, and he loves the nostalgia.
Yeah.
If you watch the Love and Saucers documentary, they kind of show his tape collection, which is very well curated, by the way. There's some good shit in his collection.
Yeah.
But there's so much. If I remember correctly, he has like walls of VHS.
Yeah. Like I think his personal room is like walls and walls and walls.
Yeah, which is sick.
Insane.
So David's home life is nothing out of the ordinary, really. He's very stable and his home is quiet. He lives with his ex-wife, Janice, who he is still very close with, even though they're not married. And his ex-wife suffers from health issues, so he helps care for her and her medical needs. And although David's life in his golden years is calm, the same cannot be said for his childhood, a time in which he was not like the other kids. And that is very much an understatement.
Right. David is a baby boomer. He was born in 1944 in Paulding County, Georgia. He was the oldest of 3 kids. And he had a super humble blue-collar upbringing. I mean, we're talking...
Same, brother.
We're talking farmer Georgia.
He definitely, in his childhood pictures, he definitely looks like a rural farm kid. Like, big ears, blonde hair, tooth gaps.
Yeah.
He's a rural little something.
He's cute. He was a cute kid.
He's a little American man.
He's a little American boy. And what made him such a good little American boy is that, like, he really liked farm life. Even though it was tough work, he loved to mow the grass and slop the pigs and, like, feed the animals. It's what he came to know best, and he really liked it. But he was isolated from other kids because they were farmers. They were surrounded by patches of woods and like stretches of open farmland, but they basically had like no other neighbors. Mm-hmm. When he wasn't doing chores, he was always walking around the fields looking for arrowheads. In Love and Saucers, he claims that he's part Choctaw and that the farm that they had, like his family's farm, was originally Choctaw territory, which is totally accurate, but he thinks that there was probably a village that was living there because of the amount, like he would just go walking in the fields and there were arrowheads everywhere.
That's cool.
Yeah, all the time. So he, basically accumulated a massive collection. And when he wasn't looking for arrowheads, he was drawing. He was kind of sensitive and quiet, and he really liked to draw, and he really liked to go to the movies. One of the things that David didn't like about his upbringing was, I think, just the culture of the South, and especially with religion. He hated the Southern gospel because his grandparents took him to Baptist tent revivals. And he was just like, even as a child, was like, this is fucking like ridiculous. People speaking in tongues and hellfire and like just shit like that. He was just like, this is like super confusing and I don't want to be here. His early exposure to egregious gospel really turned him off of religion entirely. And he never went back to religion. He never believed. And unfortunately, his home life was like super tumultuous. In my document, I said that he was held captive by his parents' dysfunctional marriage. I think that's the best way to put it. His parents were super heavy drinkers and they, quote, fought like cats and dogs. His dad, he was really unfaithful, and his mother was inconsolably bitter about it. They would get drunk and they would fight about it all the time. And because David was the oldest, it wasn't uncommon for him to like end up in the crossfire of their arguments. Quote, if I was anywhere around while they were drinking, I usually got hit or something like that. Sometimes it was with a belt, sometimes with a rather thick switch.
Switches are like the little branches on trees.
Yeah.
The little tiny ones.
Yeah. I just got so sick and tired of it. It was like living in hell. It was hell.
Oh, David.
Poor David. And although David took most of the abuse from his parents, he doesn't really like dwell on it very much. It's not something he really like talks about. He just says like, that was just the way that I was raised.
It sounds like he more focuses on the fact that he farmed and enjoyed it.
Yeah, and that he was being like visited by extraterrestrials too.
Also that.
Yeah.
That's just like a side note. It goes in this order. Primary, I had fun on the farm. Secondary, oh, there were aliens.
Yeah.
Tertiary, oh, and I got abused by my parents.
We shouldn't laugh, but very true. So that's like the baseline of David's childhood. But our story really begins when he turned 8 and his childhood drastically changed. Because this is when he began encountering strange things.
If you enjoy our podcast, please rate, review, and consider becoming a patron by visiting patreon.com/radiograve. Your patronage and support helps us continue to make content for you. You can stay up to date with us by following our Instagram account at Radio Grave Podcast, and be sure to tell all your spooky friends about us too. Thanks for listening. Now back to the show. So 1952 is the summer it began. And that summer there was a little hairy guy.
And it wasn't David.
David was there, but there was another little hairy guy.
Literally.
So, like Amber said, David's first encounter was when he was 8 years old. He was playing alone around the backside of the family barn when he heard a voice call out from the trees. And the voice called out, "David, behind you."
David, behind you.
When David turned around, he was greeted by a small hairy guy. Little being.
Yeah.
Little entity. Walking toward him from the woods. And David described him as a little Sasquatch-looking feller. I just imagine little hairy guy in Georgia. David.
David.
I
don't know why.
You.
David.
David. Behind you, boy.
I think it was kind, though. It was like, David, behind you.
Yeah, it sounds cute to me. The hairy person had huge glowing yellow eyes, which froze David.
Scary, actually. Okay, wait, let's take a second, because this is fucking scary as fuck.
Is it?
I think so. I don't want anything coming out of the woods at all towards me ever in my life.
I think it would probably scare me a little bit now. But I think
so.
Yeah, as a kid, if I saw a little dude, I'd be like, "Oh,
I would hate
what's that?"
I think it's a terrifying experience.
Well,
to hear someone call your name and you turn around and it's a hairy being. It's like a monster.
it's a little dude.
It's a monster.
It's a little guy with eyes that hypnotize. David's quoted as saying, "I thought it was the boogeyman. I don't know what to think of it. I felt as if for a split second I was in his eyes looking back at me, and then I just freaked." As he ran, he turned his head and watched the hairy guy go back into the trees. And later in the afternoon, he returned back to the wooded area by the barn to see if the hairy guy was still there, and he was. For a second time, the hairy being came out of the trees chasing after David as he ran away back home. He was chasing him.
Literally. Can you imagine? You're like, I gotta go see. I don't know. I wonder if he's still there. And then he just comes out of the trees. He's like, David, wait, David, stop.
I would love that.
No.
I would be like, you got a message for me. You got to tell me something. Wouldn't you think?
No, I'd run.
Little dude comes out of the, hey.
First he approached. First he approached and was like, David. Second time he was like Terminator, like running. Scary.
But mini and hairy with big glowing eyes.
And not a robot.
Yeah, just a creature.
Also, for the rest of the episode, the hairy guy's name is just Hairy Guy. That's how he's referred to.
That's fair.
So, I mean, what else are we supposed to call him? Little Sasquatch? I don't think that's what he is. He's Hairy Guy.
Sass Jr.
And that's what David calls him. Hairy Guy.
Little hairy guy. I'm down. But yeah, so he went back and it came at him and he said, ugh. And the same night, David woke up from sleeping for no reason. Outside his window were two large glowing eyes of an owl in the tree. You've probably heard of aliens being owls or
Screen
appearing
memories.
as owls, yeah, to people. And David recalls dreaming about a group of small men coming into his room, but when they got to his bed, his dream would end. And he had this same dream several nights following.
Yeah.
What if the hairy guy in general was an owl? He had big yellow eyes. Maybe
I never
he is
thought
an
about
owl.
that.
I mean, in the paintings, he certainly doesn't look like one. He's close, though.
Right.
If he had wings instead of arms and legs,
Right.
could be.
Well, and also David paints his memories as they are.
Yeah.
And so sometimes like beings look away than other times. So like sometimes they have one form and then other times they have a different form depending on his memory.
Yeah, just whatever he can.
Yeah. So who knows? He could have been something else, but I only ever see him as Hairy Guy.
Big talking owl.
Yeah.
And no one knew. But that's the first encounter. That was the very first, as far as he knows, that he had. And then there's a mantis being.
Which is, this is even worse.
It
Even
kind of gets worse. Yeah. So David's second encounter was not long after. One afternoon, he went to get his softball from the barn.
The fucking barn.
Yeah, wanted to stay away from the barn.
Yeah.
When he was in the barn, he heard a noise coming from outside. He walked around to investigate and found a giant fucking praying mantis hidden behind the barn. Just a gigantic praying mantis. And he was too shocked to speak and froze and stared at the mantis that was looking back at him.
And in these, he paints a literal praying mantis.
The painting that Amber put with this in the document is just literally child David with his arms spread out going, whoa. And there's just like an 8-foot tall fucking mantis. I'm like, holy shit.
The other one is just a mantis standing next to a pig and a cow.
Like in a field, which I love.
Yeah.
But David is quoted saying, I was very terrified. It was like, what in the world am I looking at? For an 8-year-old, you don't know what to think. I mean, as a fucking 31-year-old, I don't know what to think. 32 by the time this airs, but...
Yeah.
So, suddenly, the being sprayed a bluish gray viscous liquid all over him. He got gooed.
He got gooed. People say he got jizzed. Don't say
No.
that. He's a child. He got gooed.
You can get gooed by an alien.
GOO''D.
These people need to get cummed on by aliens. Because they're wishing that on a child. Fucking A.
Yeah, gross.
So David got cummed on and ran back home screaming, covered in goo. And by the time he got home, the liquid actually had evaporated and it was gone. And there was no stains or odors or residue or anything.
We'll talk about, I'll probably mention this later. This is not a unique experience. Getting covered in goo or having gel applied to the body by unfamiliar beings, it happens a lot, I guess.
Head on, apply directly to the forehead.
Head on, apply directly to the forehead. So stupid.
I love that ad because they just say it over and over.
Yeah, they're like, this is going to work. This is how marketing works. Shut up.
I think it worked. I'll never forget Head On.
It's not even fucking around anymore.
Oh.
Give me Head On.
Collision.
Shut up.
Oh. So anyway, that was his second encounter with the mantis man. So we got hairy guy we got Manus Man. Now we got UFOs. And he saw many UFOs and light manifestations. Most of the crafts he saw were oval-shaped or round. He described them as being bright and exuding light, or sometimes unimaginably metallic and reflective. And David recalls an incident in which a craft was actually very dark, like a hovering black void.
I kind of thought that was interesting.
It was super interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
He says, quote, "Whenever a UFO was around, there was an incredibly beautiful silence. It was almost like I was inside of a vacuum or something. There could be a car outside honking its horn or something, and then it would just stop, and there would be absolutely nothing." However, there was one incident in which David had a negative experience with a UFO.
Dun,
It's-
dun, dun.
Can't be helped, really.
Yeah.
But he was playing by himself, as usual, when he suddenly realized he wasn't alone. A strange oval-shaped light manifestation appeared, and a game of hide-and-seek ensued, where the light chased him around the farm, but he was terrified, and it eventually disappeared. So
Yeah.
not really a game.
It was
not
like
very fun.
Yeah, non-consensual hide and seek. He was like running for his life, and it was like,
Yeah, it's just chasing him around.
yeah, he's like
"Jesus,
hiding,
fuck."
and it's like coming around the corner and shit.
Do you think it was like giggling? It's like
Could have been
following him. He's like, "Stop, please!"
a light anomaly, giant light anomaly. He's like, it's gonna fucking light me on fire.
David had often dreamt of little men coming into his room, and it wasn't long before they would begin to appear just the same as the mantis and the hairy guy, face to face. One day, David was walking alone to his friend's house through a field. He felt as if he was being watched, but there was nothing around. David stopped because he suddenly heard the sound of a cow mooing. It's a cow farm.
It's a cow farm.
You're gonna find cows outside.
They're gonna be cow.
But when he turned, he suddenly saw a bald head coming up behind a bush.
It's not a cow.
Not a cow. You're gonna find aliens outside. So he sees the bald head coming up, and then he sees two bizarre-looking eyes on that head, and he gets scared, and then everything goes white for him.
Which is like kind of interesting.
She's like, "Whoop!"
He just sees like the top of the head with the eyes, and then it's like, pew.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, I don't know if that's like just because he went into shock or because of some like alien manipulation, but
I tend to think
still
it's
is like, whoa.
manipulation.
yeah, the one of the accompanying paintings in this document is literally just he's in the field, and then like a little bit of this head is poking up, and then the next painting is he's just like on the ground, like oh.
Yeah.
So when everything went white, he fell to the ground and curled up in like a fetal position, and then suddenly a group of small gray homies were standing all around him.
Yeah. He calls them little blue guys, but he also calls them grays. We should probably preface this. Grays, they come in like two different forms, but they're small. They're like 3 or 4 feet tall, and they have the original eyes and the original like big heads and shit like that, but they're never naked. They're always wearing like jumpsuits or like coveralls. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're like little frontline troopers that go scout around.
Yeah, they're like worker bees. And that's like pretty much how they're always reported. It's not uncommon. I mean, literally, it's with every abduction story. These grays are there. They're always there. And they're always wearing blue, like jumpsuits of some sort. And they're small.
Yeah, and if they're like ground team, I could see why they're seen so often.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that go out the most and
Yeah.
picking up people, and
They're the workers. They do all kinds of stuff. They work for the higher beings. They wear blue. That's why he calls them blue guys, but they're grays. And that's why he calls them grays.
they're grays in blue. So he is on the ground, and his legs are weak, and he shuts his eyes tight, and he hears 3 distinct beeps. Like beep, 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 beep. Yeah. And when he opens his eyes, he is standing chest deep in a field of weeds, not sure how he got there. So he ran home, and he could hear his mother calling out his name echoing through the fields. His mother had been worried after David's friend came to the Huggins farm after David never arrived at the friend's house. So he'd been missing for over an hour, and she yelled at him asking where he'd been, but he didn't know what to tell her. David's parents were not kind people, nor did they entertain David's claims. He's quoted saying, as a kid, I would see one of the beings and I would run to the house and say, hey, Mom and Dad, there's something out at the barn or something behind the house. And they would say, quit making things up. There ain't nothing there.
They're fucking assholes about it.
It sounds very, very typical rural drunk
Yeah.
kind of shit. They're like, shut up, boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of what he says. It's like, shut up.
Quit making shit up.
Which makes me think maybe one of them were abducted too.
Till the field, boy. Slop them pigs.
Slap a pig.
Go get daddy another Budweiser. So there was something there, obviously. He was seeing these things. And once David's experience started, they did not stop.
No, not at all. So one day he was searching for arrowheads by himself, as usual, hoping nothing bad would happen to him. And he suddenly looked up at the sky to see 8 blue guys falling from the sky.
It's quite a shock.
And once they hit the ground, they all start running. They're chasing David.
No.
They literally hit the ground and they're like, boom, chasing after him. So, of course, he runs and he looks behind him and he just watches them jump back up into the air and disappear. Like, okay. He said that it was like they were going, quote, behind a curtain. That's like what it looked like, which is dimensional, in my opinion.
I thought you were going to say demented. I'm like, true.
But also demented. That's kind of scary, right?
Yeah.
So he eventually got back to the house and he ran around the back side of the house to hide, basically. And he looked under his house. This is kind of a weird thing to say, but this is actually super common. Like you see these sorts of houses in the South and in Georgia where they're built on like stilts or pillars. They don't have basements. They don't have foundations. The foundation are the pillars. So you can see all the way under the fucking house. So he like looked down underneath the house and all he could see was like 5 pairs of little blue legs on the other side of his house. He's looking at the legs. He's like, fuck. And then the legs just turned around and they walked away. They were like, damn, he's gone. Maybe they thought that like coming close to the house was a no-no. I mean, it's the middle of the day.
Yeah, they're probably not supposed to just like enter into houses.
Yeah, I don't think so. So he went inside his house and he went into his room and he sat and he sat and he looked out the window for a while, but he didn't see anything. He just waited and nothing ever showed. So that night, David went to bed, but then he woke up suddenly. And when he looked out the window, he could see a UFO hovering in the air. And it was partially in front of the full moon. It was like blocking out part of the moon.
Scared.
And he's staring out the window. He's looking at the moon, but then he sees that there are a group of grays in the field. And then he realizes that there's some that are right outside of his window.
No.
Yeah. So it wasn't long before they just came in. They appeared. And David remembers that the grays took him outside and then they all floated up into the UFO together, weightlessly. In his painting of this, they're holding him and he's like, oh, like his mouth is open, like screaming. And they're just like holding on, like one's like hanging off of his leg, just like, oh, here we go.
We're getting beamed. They look stiff like old South Park characters did. Like that's how they look. They're
Yeah. And he's like definitely freaked but it's weird because the UFO is just like an oval, but it kind of looks like a hole.
a little bit, yeah. In the painting, certainly.
Yeah. I don't know. It's weird. So anyway, they floated up. All of a sudden, they were inside of this craft. And David looks around and he's freaked out, but he describes this space that he is in as like a large, sterile metal room that like reminded him of a doctor's office. Everything is like stainless steel. Everything. And in the room, he stood next to a little gray, a blue guy. And he looked at him and he perceived this little guy as like a little boy, just like him, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because they were the same height, but he looked at him and he was like, oh, like this is a little boy like me. And Then he realized in the room there was a black-haired woman wearing a robe, a blue robe, holding a long, thin rod in her hand. And David described her as having both human and alien-like physical features. Human-like body, not so human face. David recalls asking the little gray alien, the blue guy, if the woman was his mother, which I think is kind of cute. Like,
Is that your mom?
oh, you're a little boy. Like, that looks like that could be your mom. It's an interesting thing to say. So he said that both the woman and the gray smiled at him. And in his depictions and a lot of his paintings and in a lot of his memories, he does recall them having features that are alien but are expressive, which is uncommon. People say that that when they experience these extraterrestrials, they get senses of how they feel. Like they feel uninterested, or they feel stern, or they feel calm.
But they don't express facially like how humans would.
No.
Yeah.
And so he says that they both smiled at him. But I thought that was really interesting. So the beings perform a procedure on David, which he compares to how humans tag quail. The small gray holds David's shoulders as he tilts his head back. And the woman inserts the rod up David's nose, eventually forcing it deep into his navel. Navel? His nasal cavity. And he says that at first it wasn't going in, and then he heard like a crunch in his nose, or like basically inside of his head.
That's how you, it's trepanation. They're opening the third eye. Trepanation.
I think that they're doing more than that. So he believes that this procedure, like he said, was to tag him like a quail. Mm-hmm. And they put that tag inside of his head. And David begins to cry out in pain, and he's crying, and he says, "You hurt me, you hurt me." And the woman leans down and she says to him, "Let me see." And the two stared into each other's eyes, and he recalls the pain suddenly went away. She took away his pain. And he was comforted by this woman as he looked deep into her eyes. He definitely describes her as like a mother. Mm-hmm. I mean, as soon as he saw her, he thought that she was a mother.
Side note.
Yeah.
Have you ever met someone who you instinctually could tell they're a mom? They give mom energy.
Yeah.
But they don't have kids?
Ew. Yeah.
One of my tattoo artists is like that. And,
really?
And I accidentally, someone said something. I was like, oh, you can't say that to a mom. And she was like, what? And I was like, aren't you a mom? No. What the fuck? And I was like, what?
People started asking me about my kids. People would say stuff like that. People would be like, oh, do you have children? Or like, oh, you have kids, right? And it's like, why the fuck would I have kids? I realize it's because I'm almost 30. Even when I hear about people that I used to know from school, getting married and having kids, I'm like,
you're like, what the fuck?
I'm like, oh my God, really? Having kids? And then I realize oh, this is normal.
Supposedly. Yeah.
Supposedly, this is normal for people to get married and have kids. Not us. No children for us.
We're married to the grind.
We're married to the grind. We're married to Christ. Okay. So... yeah, so basically she was mom energy, but she was also sort of like Venus, like a divine feminine. He believes that this intimate moment of her comforting him was a time in which she was removing this memory from his mind. And we have to remember that this whole story, as we go through this timeline, these are all recovered memories. He does not remember this in real time. So when he says, oh, I think this is when she took away my memory, that's basically...
Makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Other details that he remembers from this incident are really interesting. So he meets with another being on the craft. He was introduced to this tall, human-looking man, and he gave David the impression of authority. And he had a weird knob on the back of his head. I don't really know how to describe it. I mean, it's depicted as just I don't even know. It's weird.
Imagine half of a sausage
Yeah, like a thick sausage.
Yeah, like half of a kielbasa.
Yeah.
But it's like taped to the center of the back of the head and it like sticks up over.
It's like not cool to look at.
It is weird.
Yeah.
He's a weird guy.
Yeah. I mean, and also David paints him like a human, but he's bald and his skin is kind of a different color, but he just has like a knob. And David even sometimes refers to him as a ponytail guy or says that the knob is a ponytail. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of reminds me of like a weird hairstyle. Yeah.
Like head on, it looks like a bun on the top of his head.
Head on, apply directly to the forehead. It's like a tubular bun.
Yeah, it's weird. So the man walked David to a window where they could see Earth from the craft that they were on. And the man talked about traveling to Earth, but David doesn't remember anything else about their conversation. Basically like, hey, come over here to check this out. See that? That's the Earth. We travel to Earth. And then it's like, blip, 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 blip. And the next morning he woke up in his bed thinking, oh, I had like a weird dream. And he sat up and he immediately had like a super intense nosebleed.
Yeah, when you get fucking lobotomized because he mommy poked.
He did get mommy
He got mommy
poked.
poked. So let's talk about mommy a little more.
Mommy.
So this woman is more than a woman. She's more than mommy. This woman is named Crescent. This episode is called Crescent, a Love Story. Hint, hint. Do you know where this is going?
Oppie.
Anyway, she is the focus of David's experiences. She is the center of David's universe. He is in love with her. David's paintings of Crescent are surreal. She has very pale skin, a small nose, and thin lips. She has huge almond-shaped eyes that are totally black, but have a vibrant blue toward the inside. She has a human body, but her face is definitely less than human. It's very like, I think it's halfway between alien and human. It's a little bit more human than an alien.
It's weird because it's like a human body that is human colored skin. And then the
like
face.
A white face.
Yeah, like a white face.
But she had very long black fingernails. She has short black hair, but David says he can tell that it's not real, like she's wearing a wig. And David believes the wig is worn only to help her appear more human. Although she does not have any indications of being an old person, David claims he can tell that she is a very old being with an old soul. And he finds her very beautiful, regardless of her strange inhuman qualities. Crescent would become a figure in David's life who would change and grow alongside him over time. She would begin first as a sort of mother figure, protector, watcher, kind of like how she was in that first encounter. And then she would become a figure of desire, a teacher, and a lover. Finally, she would be a partner to him, equals in a sense. After meeting Crescent, David continued to have more and more unusual extraterrestrial experiences on the farm in Georgia on a regular basis, and Crescent was usually there among the many others. He did say that all the beings scared the hell out of him. They always did, but they were never malicious or unkind. They were just scary. In retrospect, David believes that these beings were trying to protect and take care of him. This became especially clear after David received a severe beating from his father one night after seeing a figure standing in the moonlight. On that warm summer night, David would be drawn out onto the porch to get some air. Not far from the farm, he could see a dark figure standing out in the open grass. He recognized this tall figure as being the knob-headed man, the sausage bun, that he had met in the UFO. David stared hard, and the man stared back with hypnotizing orange eyes.
Scary.
Yeah. David was bewildered, and he ran inside and told his father immediately what he had seen out in the grass. And his father ran outside to check, and then he rushed back in the house moments later, super, super angry. He had now reached his limit, and he shouted at David, "There's nobody out there, boy. Quit making things up." That night, David got a whipping he would remember for the rest of his life. David continues in his story, quote, "The next day I went behind the house, and there's Crescent, with a few grays, and the insect being, and I remember telling her, 'My mama and daddy don't believe me that I see you,' and I got a whipping. As soon as I said it, I knew Crescent didn't like hearing that. Then she stared right into my eyes and said, then don't tell them. After that, I never said another word. There were many more incidents to follow. One day, David went to go crawl under an old tool shed while playing alone, of course.
He's like, there's fucking arrowheads under there.
I know there's arrowheads under this shed. Suddenly, Crescent and a gray appeared in front of him, and they both warned David there is a snake under the tool shed and that it is too dangerous to play there. David watched as a big black snake emerged from under the shed. In his painting, David is being gently embraced by Crescent. I like the painting. It's like Crescent has her arms around little David, and then the little alien boy is like standing in front of them, and there's the little snake by the shed.
Also, if you look too, like she's holding him and he's holding her back. Like his arm is around her arm. Like, oh, mommy.
Mommy. Another incident, David nearly drowned in a deep, fast-moving creek. Unable to find his footing, he was whisked away by the current. Struggling to resurface, he suddenly saw a face in the water.
Scary.
If it's a corpse. But he looked at the face and heard a voice say, "Let him live." David's toe immediately catches a root and he resurfaces, catches his breath, and swims to shore.
I've heard of these things happening to other people though.
Really?
Maybe not necessarily like extraterrestrial, but people like coming pretty close to like dying and then hearing voices or seeing people. It's called like the third man phenomena.
Interesting.
Or something like that. People who are like outdoors people who get caught in situations will sometimes feel like, oh my God, I'm going to die here. And then a person appears and shows them the way or tells them to hold on, or people will die, literally like die. And then they'll hear voices telling them to go back, or they'll see like someone else there. Like it's actually like a whole fucking thing. Maybe this could have been that. I don't know if it's extraterrestrial, but it would make more sense if he was like, I saw Crescent's face.
Yeah. But there are more incidents. David recalls coming upon a huge dark-skinned alien, it's probably me, who had been waiting for him under a tree. David remembers she was female, although she had no clear female characteristics. He just knew. She opened her arms up to David, welcoming him, almost an invitation to come sit in her lap and cuddle. David was terrified. She never approached him. She only sat and watched him silently smiling. But David says there was something special about her.
This is like a scary painting to me.
Yeah, I think
it's the scariest one.
I think it's interesting that his only like commentary on it is like, there was something special about her. It's like, she's gonna kill you. I don't know what she is. She's scary.
What if this is like Crescent's other form?
Could be, yeah, like her more natural form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's weird because she's huge. It's weird because she's smiling and she's just sitting in the shade.
Like, come here, come sit in my lap, little one. Like,
And then he like is like, and she just like closes her arms up and is like just looking at him. Like,
yeah, it could be her. Yeah.
It could be her. I don't know. It's the painting that he has is fucking I kind of hate it. I don't know why.
It's a little bit scary.
It's because she's dark skinned. That's why it makes me uncomfortable. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That was a joke.
No.
Bad joke.
You weren't joking.
No, it's because she's huge and scary.
Another incident, he remembers coming upon a weird object hidden behind a tree. He described it as a big egg. And as he approached, he suddenly found himself inside the egg.
This reminds me of Sandown Clown.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Once inside the egg, it was just him and a small gray. The gray was holding a glass tube container and showed it to David. Inside the glass container was what David would describe as a very tiny gray baby. And this totally shocked and confused David, and he could not understand why they showed him this. He never understood it.
This is not the first time that a gray will do this. The grays are known to be unemotional, totally neutral. They are also described as being mechanical at times. So they show him a little gray baby in a tube without thinking about how David would react. Like kind of like a teenage boy being like, you want to see something cool? And it's like his dad's gun. You know what I mean?
Something like that, yeah.
It's like you're not really thinking about how it would scare David.
Yeah.
There is that non-connection because The Greys will continue to do this to David.
Well, and I mean, you have to think, he stumbled across this big, like, egg. I don't think they were, like, intending for him to be there. So maybe that little Grey was just doing something with the baby or checking up on the little tube baby. Mm-hmm. And fucking David just walks into the egg.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, check it out. I got baby.
Yeah, because he passes it to him.
Yeah.
And is like, here.
Look, baby.
And David's like,
It's like, and I was like, God, well, you came into my egg. The fuck?
Yeah, literally, like, you were walking by my egg. It sucked you in. You're interrupting my work. So here, this is what you get to see now. Trauma. Like, maybe
Look
it's
at this baby.
Maybe it's that. I don't know. The Greys are weird. Anyway.
So there are all those incidents. And in 1955, David and his family moved away from their old farm to a new one in Ackworth, Georgia. It was late at night when the Huggins drove off for the last time from the farm with their last load of moving boxes. David sat in the back seat, turned around looking out the back window, watching the farm disappear as they drove away down the gravel country road. As the farm got smaller, an object appeared and began to grow larger as it stretched across the horizon. David watched as a UFO came into view. It was slightly camouflaged, barely noticeable to him, and totally invisible to his family. The UFO didn't follow them, and David wouldn't have another significant experience again until 1961. Very significant experience.
The most significant experience
Of a young man's life.
Of a young man's life. So, in the summer of 1961, David was only 17 when he came into contact with Crescent for the first time in a very long time in the flesh. I think he mentions that he had maybe had dreams, but not like this. So he was taking a shortcut through a wooded area on his way to meet with some friends at a lake. And the path was shady and cool, so he was kind of strolling and taking his time. And then suddenly, in the trees, he sees Crescent laying in the grass. And his first split reaction was fear. Mm-hmm. But within only a couple moments, the fear washed away and was replaced by a very intense sexual arousal. He was like, oh my God. And then he was like, oh my God. So Crescent like stood up and she began to walk up to him. And as she did, he began to just take off his clothes like automatically. And he would say, quote, I couldn't get my pants down fast enough. Like,
so weird.
Yeah. So Crescent led him into the grass where she mounted him and took his virginity.
Mounted him like a horse.
Literally. And he recalls that her eyes were looking into his. And in that moment, she was very beautiful to him. And then he ejaculated. And David says that the sensation was not so much as pure ecstasy as it was just very, very fucking painful.
That is so weird.
The gorilla grip was gripping and like just fucking him up. Like he, like even in his painting, he's like, looks like he's screaming.
Grayarilla.
Yeah. So basically he like the pain and the coming, like there's nothing, he just passes out. And he wakes up like 15, 20 minutes later with his pants down around his ankles, like in the grass in the woods, no clothes on. And she was gone. And David would say later, I thought, if anything, I'd be losing it in the backseat of a Ford, something like that, but it didn't work out that way.
Man, they didn't even talk or anything.
No, they didn't. So 2 weeks after losing his virginity in the woods, David woke up in the middle of the night to a strange visitor. Next to his bed was Hairy Guy. And Hairy Guy told David to get dressed and follow him outside.
I hope he doesn't have sex with him.
I hope not either. So David just obeys, kind of like the same as he did with Crescent. Mm-hmm. Like he just automatically gets dressed and follows Hairy Guy outside. And Hairy Guy leads him to a large, glowing, pulsating egg shaped object, which is near the tree line of the Huggins farm. And As they're walking up, they can see Crescent standing outside the egg, as well as the mantis. They're just waiting for him.
I love the mantis.
Mantis is like, to me. All David remembers is being given instructions to, quote, not remember anything, and his memory is erased. After these experiences, David's lifelong journey of being an abductee begins, and the visits are always sexual in nature. When asked if he felt violated by these early experiences, David would say no. He would answer 2 other questions in an art blog interview. And the question, do you have a say in what they do to you? And he would say, it was up to me. And then they asked him, do they conform to the law of free will? And he said, yeah, there is free will.
So it is totally consensual.
Yeah.
He wants to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. They're never like taking him and like
making him do anything. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I guess we could just say right now, with other experiences that people have that are sexual abductions, sometimes it is intensely terrifying and not consensual. And generally speaking, when this happens, it's more medical, like they're extracting semen or eggs.
More clinical.
Yeah. So for the following 2 years, David had quickies with Crescent on a regular basis.
Okay.
They were uniform in a way, like really hypersexual, but sometimes they were business-like. She's showing up. She's always riding cowgirl.
Okay.
But no, she is always on top. And aside from the first encounter, his orgasms were incredible. He would say that he felt like subdued while they were having sex, but he said that like he was coming.
He was coming.
I mean, who wouldn't be with Crescent?
Me. I wonder why it hurt so bad the first time.
I don't know. Probably because he had a lot of built up in there. So I don't know. That's interesting, huh? So these sexual sessions were always followed by David just passing out, and then brain fog. Not a speck of post-nut clarity. Nothing.
Post-nut fog.
Post-nut fog and amnesia. So from Love and Saucers, David opens the documentary reading from his journal / movie script that he's like writing by hand. And it's recounting his life experiences, specifically with these encounters where she's visiting him, having sex, and then making him forget. So he reads a passage detailing one of these teenage encounters. David opens his eyes only to see a pair of glowing eyes staring back at him. It was a little hairy guy, and David is not afraid. He is very calm. A voice says, "David, get dressed. Come outside." Cut to David opening the door. Follow. They cross the field into a line of trees. There is something on the ground. It is glowing. They go inside. There are 3 insect-like beings. There is a woman. David becomes aroused. They have sex. It is soon over. The woman looks at him with a slight smile on her face. She says, "Forget." David says, "Forget."
My favorite movie. So cut forward to 1962. By this time, David started to feel trapped in Georgia. His parents wanted him to just get a job and be a farmer like them, but David wanted to paint. He would say, "My parents never liked it. They thought it was useless, a waste of time." He heard about the Art Students League in New York City and felt compelled to go. One day, a message came to him. "If you don't leave now, you never will." So I left. In 1963, at 19 years old, David wrote a farewell letter to his parents and left home. He never could say goodbye to their faces. He says that they would have never let him leave if he had. David made his way up to New York City on his own and joined the Art Students League. He fit into city life just fine. He got a job at a hardware store and rented a small apartment in Manhattan. David flourished in art school. His life was quiet, and he even dated a girl named Ethel from school for a period of time. Since his abrupt move to New York City, David had virtually had no visits from Crescent or any sort of ET encounter. Maybe the hustle and bustle of the city deterred the visitors, or maybe his sexual escapades with Crescent were over, but that was certainly not the case. Even after moving over 850 miles away from Georgia, the visitors would eventually catch up with him. David would soon come to discover that no matter where he was, they were there too. Going forward, the following series of events occurs over a span of 5 to 8 years, beginning in 1965 into the early 70s. So in 1965-1966, David is working on a rainy Saturday afternoon at the hardware store. While stocking the shelves, a man and a woman enter the store. Instead of entering all the way, the couple just stood near the doorway. David approached them and asked, "How can I help you today?" Neither say a word, they just stare at David. He asked them again if they needed help, but they still didn't respond. And he felt as if they had a hypnotizing effect on him. David found them to be very disturbing, but before he knew it, they hurried out of the shop and into the city streets.
It kind of feels like a Men in Black experience.
A little bit, yeah. Just someone like coming to observe and intimidate. Well, it rained for the rest of the day. And by the time David closed down the shop, it was raining cats and dogs. It was the transit strike in New York City, so it was impossible to get a cab or catch a bus or a train. And not wanting to get soaked from the walk home, David decided to stick out his thumb for a ride and try to catch something. It didn't take long for David to get picked up, actually. Out of the rain came a large black car, pulling up to David's side as if it had been waiting for him.
Men in Black.
Dude, he opens the door to speak with the driver. The driver was a woman, and she asked him where he going. He would tell her he only needs a ride across Central Park and that he'd be just fine with walking the rest of the way home after. So she tells him get in. David hops into the passenger seat, tells her thank you, and she drives. The two of them spoke very little. David recalls some small talk about the transit strike and the weather. Other than that, he says the ride was silent. However, David had a strange sense that they were not alone. He felt as if there was someone sitting in the back seat, but he didn't want to look. Eventually, the woman drove him further, dropping him off at his apartment.
Which is like, he was like, yeah, you can just take me across Central Park. And then she just went straight to his apartment.
That is weird.
He didn't like tell
Like,
her.
how
I
did you
don't
know
think he
that?
told her where.
Probably not.
Yeah.
No. So David got out of the car quickly, and he thanked the woman for the ride. But the woman didn't respond at all. And according to David, she just looked David down with the same piercing gaze as the woman that he encountered at the hardware store earlier in the day. She nodded her head at him and then drove away. And David had a strange sensation wash over him, and he ran into his building. That night, David had a strange dream. In the dream, he saw a woman's face, her eyes closed and her skin very, very pale. This face was floating in the dark, hovering above David's, drawing closer and closer to his. Her expression was peaceful, and he felt like he recognized her. When he opened his eyes in the morning, he heard a voice say, "We will be back tonight." He knew it was her, it was Crescent, and she kept her promise.
That is true. She did keep her promise because she came back. She came back for months, actually. Almost every night, Crescent would return to David's dreams. And David did not know what to think. It was torture for him because he couldn't tell if it was real or not. He was only seeing her when he was asleep. They were dreams, but she seemed so real. He had been with her before. X, Y, and Z. And obviously it was taking a toll on his personal life. At this time, David is still going steady with Ethel, but his dream realm extraterrestrial affair with Crescent would lead to their falling out. I don't think that David ever told her about it, but the big thing is that Ethel ended up having an experience of her own. So according to David, Ethel had been alone in her apartment when she woke up to a group of little men all around her bed.
Oh no.
And she ran from her apartment screaming and crying, and her neighbors searched her entire apartment for her, and they found nothing. The next morning, Ethel packed up her belongings and left New York City. And then she allegedly joined a convent, and she never spoke to David ever again.
How does he know she joined a convent
I think
if he never talked to her again?
I think he heard it from the other girls at school.
Oh.
Like, he was like, my girlfriend's gone, Stacy, have you heard from Ethel? Like, her apartment's empty. I'm so worried about her. And she's like, yeah, she left New York City. She decided to become a nun. He's like, oh shit, better go get boned down by this sexy alien. So now David was alone and his real life girlfriend was gone. But the dreams of Crescent persisted. She was all he had, and he wasn't even sure if she was real or not. But one night, while he was walking home, David saw a bouquet of cyclamens in the window of a flower shop. And David thought to himself, I'll get the flowers for her. Why not? If she takes them tonight, I'll know that she is real. If she does not take them, I'll use the bouquet as a model for a painting. Win-win. Whatever.
Nice.
David brought the flowers home and put them on the bookshelf. Before falling asleep, he says out loud, those are for you, in the hopes that maybe she would hear him. And the next morning, he was shocked to find that the flowers were gone. Crescent had taken the flowers. She was real.
Yes.
David and Crescent were officially reunited. But the vibe was different from before because Crescent was his girlfriend now.
That was pretty much their becoming official moment.
Yeah. Like, my other girlfriend is gone and she took the flowers. She accepted it. Back in Georgia, the encounters that Crescent and him had were extremely physical. They were like super vivid, and like having sex with Crescent in the woods in the middle of the day was like totally like super hot. It was just like really hypersexual, but he would be forced to forget about these experiences. Mm-hmm. But the encounters in David's New York apartment were more like metaphysical. So like we talked about, they began as the floating head dreams, and soon she began to appear with like a full body. And her visits were at night. She would gently wake him with her presence, and he never felt afraid. And then he began to remember the interactions that he had with her being like very romantic and intimate. She would caress him with her long fingernails, and she would always stare into his eyes when they were having sex or just all the time. She would always make melodic purring sounds while having sex with David. And it was like really comforting. And they also began rubbing their foreheads together. And David knew this was her way of kissing from her planet or wherever she was from. She like told him that. And he would say in Love and Saucers, the next time you're with your girlfriend, start rubbing heads. Trust me on this. David always thought that she was beautiful, but the more and more time he spent with her, he started to see way beyond her physical appearance. She just became like the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. She was a woman. She wasn't an alien. And he was attracted to her big blue eyes, and he really liked her long fingernails. And she also had a fucking rockin' bod.
A rockin' human bod.
A rockin' human bod. I guess there was an element of vulnerability which began to emerge between them. And I think he felt like she was doing that too. Giving in. Like they were falling in love. And he would say, my relationship with Crescent was warm and friendly. A little strange. What do I mean a little? It was very strange. But she was my girlfriend, really. We had a very unconventional relationship. So, alongside the newfound intimacy between the two of them, David would say she was never alone. Whereas like before, it always seemed like it was just them. It was like in the woods. It was like, you know what I mean? But now she was always accompanied by the mantis. And David would see him in the corner of his room. He would just be in the dark. He was like watching, observing, or supervising in a way every single time. If Crescent was near him, the mantis was there too. And once they were done, David would just pass out as usual. And when he woke up, they'd both be gone. He would also mention that the mantis always sort of treated him like he was a child. Maybe infantilized him.
Yeah.
Like, aw, you sweet little half monkey human.
Little monkey man.
Yeah. I mean, like, it kind of makes sense. Like, if these are, like, very much so higher beings, which, I mean, I obviously think that they are. Like, you know, I think that they probably think that, like, David is dumb. because he's human. And I mean, humans are dumb compared to these guys. These guys are telepathic.
And they got that higher dimensional pussy.
They got that higher dimensional pussy. So one night, something incredible would happen with David and would eventually lead to a life-altering string of events, which is like, he's already having life-altering events.
It's been altered already.
His life has already been altered, but like shit goes way crazier. If you've listened this far, I'm sure that you may understand what is happening here if you're familiar with this kind of like abduction, sexual encounters. So you might see what's coming. But if you don't know, or if you haven't heard of aliens having sexual encounters with humans, just be prepared for some really weird details to come in next week's episode.
Details with cum.
Details with cum.
Details of cum.
This is like, I know this episode was a little bit like, it was a lot of laying the groundwork with the end being like really sexy, but like next week is it.
I would call it less sexy. It is sexual, but I would call it less sexy.
It's definitely a lot more out of this world. Yeah.
Out of this wussy.
Out of this wussy. But yeah, that's where we leave off, and we'll pick back up with, I guess, more life-altering events for David Huggins.
How more altered can you get?
I don't know. I'm eating a Kit Kat bar. Okay, but wait. Here's a question for you.
Me? Mm-hmm. Okay.
What do you think is the most interesting thing about David's early experiences as a child?
I don't know. I guess I would say the variety.
Yeah.
But there is like, as time goes on, it does seem like all of these different kinds of entities have some relation with each other. Have some, like, the mantis is always supervising with Crescent.
Right.
Crescent probably is like a huge gray.
Yeah. The tall grays.
Hairy man is a little, maybe he's their dog.
I don't understand the hairy man. There's a lot of stuff I don't understand with some of these like entities or beings.
Mm-hmm. It is just I think that's the main thing for me is there's so many different things that he encounters, like creatures, and at different times and settings, and they're all doing different things. And then he's in an egg with the alien baby, and then he's having sex with Crescent. It's like, what? It's just a lot of things.
It is a lot of things, but then also at the same time, like, I don't feel like his story is outlandish. I don't know why.
No, and especially because they all have kind of a connection, a network.
Yeah, like nothing is random. Mm-hmm. But I wonder, what if other people who get abducted also experience like the big brown gray or the big brown alien that's under the tree,
that thing's weird.
Yeah, or like the Sasquatch, not the Sasquatch, but the little hairy guy. Like, I wonder if they are experiencing those entities, but they
are memory blocked. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's all that Sasquatch is.
Yeah. I mean that is something that people do believe. Also, what is your favorite painting so far? Whichever one you choose will be the one that we'll put up on the Instagram as your favorite.
Oh my God, let me look.
Okay. There's a lot towards the end of this episode with Crescent, so I'll just describe them. There's one of them standing together. She has long nails and she's looking deep into his eyes, and there's the mantis behind them. Mm-hmm. There's one of him laying on a couch with his head in her lap, and she's holding his head. There's one of him laying in a bed with the blankets over him, and Crescent is naked and running away, and she's covering her mouth, giggling towards the mantis being. There's
so weird.
There's one of them rubbing heads with the mantis being super far in the background, literally just like a little tiny stick figure. That one's really interesting. And then the best one of all is one of David laying. Oh, you know what I just realized? His bed is just a mattress on the floor.
He's an art student.
Yeah.
What do you want?
So funny. But and then the last one is him laying like on his bed, and Crescent is like on his bed next to him, and she is jacking. She's cranking his fucking shit.
Cranking his hog.
She's cranking his hog, and he's looking down at his hog that's being cranked, and he's like, has a kind of look of like disbelief and
He
awe.
looks a little horrified to me.
He's like, oh. Yeah, and she's like smiling. The mantis being is in the corner glowing yellow like usual.
As you do.
But yeah, here's the thing. He never paints his wiener like ginormous or small. Like it's just average. Like he's very like modest about it.
Well, I mean, it would be kind of weird to paint it gigantic. Because I think if he made it huge, people would be like, nah, all of it's fake. There's no way he's slinging that thing.
There's no way he's slinging that thing and he's not getting bitches from Earth.
Yeah, he would get many Earth bitches and probably even that fucking mantis.
Yeah, that's true.
He's like, I'm fucking the mantis, I'm fucking the Greys, I'm fucking Crescent, I'm fucking the little Sasquatch, I'm fucking them all. But from that, actually speaking of that series of like intimate moment pictures, one of the ones that really catches me is the one where they're rubbing foreheads, because you can see it's like such a notable size difference in the two of them. Crescent is huge. Her head is like twice the size of his head. And like, yeah, they're having a nice moment, but it just kind of, I always thought it was weird.
Yeah.
Just to show them pressed together, she's so big.
Yeah. Especially in that rendition, because in some others, she's like the same size as him. But really looking at her in this one, like she does have a big, that could be on him. Like he could have drawn her like fucked up, but
it's weird. Like she's behind, like she's farther away, but her head is still bigger.
yeah.
But then you have the next picture where she's cranking his hog,
Yeah.
and she looks the same size.
Even, or maybe even smaller.
Yeah, she looks like a petite woman.
Like a regular sized woman, yeah.
My overall favorite though, that I would definitely buy and hang on my wall, is the one of the mantis in the field with the cow and the pig. It's so surreal and funny to me.
Yes, I agree about the praying mantis next to the cow and the pig. I think the original hairy man walking out of the woods with the big eyes is fucking scary as fuck. So, especially because he's making a face that's like, like I wish I could like show
He
you.
just looks like that. You don't have to be mean.
It's a D, a black letter D
On its side.
on its side. That's not in a happy face. It's in a frown. It's in a frown, and it basically you can be like, that's what it looks. That's what it looks like. That's the sound that's coming out of his mouth.
So funny.
Those are the two that we'll put up on the Instagram. We'll label them both as Dom's favorite and Amber's favorite.
We should also put up the one of them rubbing foreheads. I think that's a really good one.
Yeah. And you know what? Sorry, I'm sticking my foot out.
I thought I
I'm
saw.
just stretching.
I thought I saw an animal. I look over and Amber's foot is just like emerging from under the table. Jesus.
Sorry. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. This is the end of part 1 of Crescent, a love story.
Valentine special.
Valentine special. And then next week it'll continue to be Valentine special because, you know,
It's February.
I thought we were going to be able to make this one episode, but it's
It's a lot to go over. He has so many experiences. It's like,
it's a lot of experiences and it's a lot to take in. And the next episode, we kind of like fly a little bit off the handles and I think it would be too much. So we'll catch you guys next week.
catch you on the flip.
Catch you on the flip flop. Catch you cranking your shit to this episode. Mm-hmm. Bye.
At 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, multiple unidentified objects were confirmed to have entered Earth's atmosphere. It is speculated that these objects are of extraterrestrial origin. The broadcast will quiet at this time for your safety. Continue to carry out the following instructions.
Radio Grave Podcast is hosted by Amber Byland and Dominique Makasuya. Music courtesy of AOA Music, Carl Casey at Whitebat Audio, and intro music by Simon Big Byland. Audio mixing and editing by Amber Byland. Logo and original art by Dominique Makasuya. Special thanks to Selma and Obi Henneke, Austin Smith, and all our supporters on Patreon. All other media and sound clips used are protected under fair use and are for the purpose of criticism, commentary, news reporting, education, and research. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.